And we are on season 2, episode 2, and I just can't remember the name of the episode. I saw you. Yeah. Did you like this one?
Mm-hmm.
Did it make you cry?
Yeah.
So almost everything makes Janice cry. So, but that's good. It's a great episode, and it certainly touches a lot of important aspects of our spiritual lives and our walk in relationship with God. And so what we're going to do is we're going to jump in and have our guests join us in just a moment. By the way, if you're interested in being a guest on our broadcast, let me know, and we might be able to arrange that. So I just have to, mute my phone before we go much further. So let's go ahead and we will have our intro, and then we will bring in our guests. All right. Oops, wrong one. There you go. So, we have just 3 guests with us this evening because one of them is Sarah's not feeling well, and so we just wish her a pleasant evening, and hopefully that she can watch us online. You never know, that. So how are you guys doing? We got Val up there.
We're doing good. Thank you.
His wife Nikki down in the lower right-hand corner, and our friend Lorene. And so I'm glad that you guys are all able to join us this evening. So, hey, just real quick, give us your thoughts, your overall impressions of this particular episode.
I really liked how, the episode's called I Saw You. Mm-hmm. And like Philip sees Matthew, Jesus sees Matthew, Jesus sees Nathaniel, Philip sees Nathaniel, Mary sees, I forget her name, Thomas's love interest. Rama. Yeah. I just thought it was interesting. I was noticing that from the theme and of course God sees us. Of course, that's
wonderful.
One.
Yeah, that's good. Cool. Good observations.
Yeah.
We hold on, Nikki. Excuse me. I just stepped on your comment, but Wednesday night is our pizza night because a local pizza restaurant gives us half off on Wednesdays. But but on the way back, we were carrying the pizza in the car, which smelled awfully good, by the way.
Yeah.
I think they ought to make an air freshener for cars and pizzas. But
and never get out of the car.
Yeah, you never get out of it. There'd be drool all over the steering wheel. So, but Janice was going through the questions with me and asking me all the questions, and I said, "Hey, I wrote them." I says, we're just going to have to wait until the broadcast. But Nikki, tell me your thoughts, your impressions of the episode.
Well, it made me cry too.
That's good.
I had never really thought about God seeing me all the time in every aspect of life, and that was really eye-opening.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Janice, you had some comments along those lines too, right? Mm-hmm. Is that the best you got? That's about all we're going to get from her this evening. So, Val, any comments you'd like to make?
Well, I just like to say, I was enjoying to see who Philip was. I really was through the Bible. I really didn't know who he was and like that. Mm-hmm. But overall, the whole thing, I'm enjoying this whole show altogether, and I've only watched where we're at today. And I know Nikki's seen a little bit more, and I know you guys seen it before. But this is really, I'm enjoying it, and it's just really good.
Yeah. He was really hesitant to start watching it. I think. I don't think he knew what to.
Yeah. For me,
well, we knew about it for a long time before
Yeah.
we actually watched it.
yeah. I watched the first episode and I said, "Nee," but then I went back and kind of forced myself through it, and it's not that the first episode's bad. It's just I thought, where are they going with all of this stuff? And but yeah, it's been really pleasant. Hey, spoiler alert, is that if I remember right from what I've read, is that in season 4, the actor who plays Philip is not going to be in season 4. Yeah.
That's hard.
I think he's maybe gone on to bigger and better things, or I mean,
Who knows?
yeah. There was another actor that quit the show after season 1, and so but yeah, let's just hope that Jonathan Rumi decides to. That'd be a bummer. so
Yeah, I thought Philip and the character of Philip and the character of Jesus look a lot alike to me.
Oh, really?
You know, I mean, to
They're
me,
similar,
they just
yeah.
look. They just look a lot alike. Like they could be brothers.
Yeah. Hey, here's a little. Maybe I mentioned this last time, and forgive me because I repeat myself a lot in my older years. Is that Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus, and the actress who plays his mother, he's actually older than she is.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I remember watching one of your side videos, and it was showing that she was in makeup for 3 hours, and I'm like,
Oh,
why
wow.
is she in makeup for 3 hours?
Well, that's why, probably, to make her look older.
Yeah, that's probably
Yeah.
why.
Yeah. That's
Wow.
cool. Yeah. So, who are other than Jesus? Other than Jesus and Matthew? Who are your top, let's say, 2 or 3 characters that you like from the show?
Mary.
Simon's.
okay.
Simon's quite a character.
Yeah. How about you, Lorene?
Well, I really like the Philip character, but he's like new. But of course, I like the women because I like that the women are included, and I love Mary, and she's just so sensitive to the people around her and to helping Rama learn to read and wanting to read the scriptures. I love that.
Nikki, any favorites?
I like Mary.
Yeah.
I like how she is and how deliberate and thoughtful she is about everything.
Yeah. Janice, who's your least favorite?
Peter, but his wife, I think, is my favorite.
Yeah. You said, what is it about Peter that just doesn't resonate for you?
I don't know. He's just so out of control.
Typical church leader.
Then there's Creepy John.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even like that he says that.
Yeah. And Creepy John is that, and of course, nobody's ever going to be able to preach the Bible again without referring to John the Baptist as Creepy John. But he's the only guy in the show that really looks like he has a fake beard.
Yeah. Totally. Because they took his makeup time and gave it to Mary.
Well,
She
if
doesn't have a beard.
If I met John, I would think he was creepy. I'm serious.
Yeah.
I would think he was creepy. So
I think most people would, to tell you the truth. I mean, he had a powerful ministry, but just his persona was probably a little bit. He's probably a little bit difficult to be around. I don't know. But
yeah,
they did humanize him.
Yeah, there was a few people I've known through my ministry and stuff that remind me of Creepy John. So.
That's funny. So, all right. Well, let's just go ahead and we'll jump in with the questions here tonight. And number one is, the producers portray Nathaniel as a man whose dreams and ambition collapsed, literally. How easy is it for you to trust God when your dreams for what life should be like do not match up with what your life is?
You're going to have to talk, Carrie.
He's gonna come through. It's just the timing of everything. I'm so impatient.
Yeah.
When things collapse, of course you want them, resolved quickly, and then God doesn't work like that. So that's not easy for me.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, there's a lot of there's a few chapters that I didn't want in my book, and in the story of my life, but you don't get to pick and choose what those are, and so that's where it really, you have the you have kind of that adjustment that you have to make with what the road that you're traveling versus the road that you hoped to be traveling. Can I be a name dropper for a moment? That I was speaking at an event where Dr. William Lane Craig, who's like one of the leading Christian apologists in the world, he was there, and I mentioned to him in that conversation, it was just a small group of leaders in his organization, and I mentioned that that he and I are living in the is, and most of our team members are living in the could be. And when you get to a certain age in life, you know what your life is. There's not a whole lot of there's not a whole lot of years left to figure out what your life could be. Younger people are living in the could be. They think about what their life could be, and they have their dreams and expectations for it, and then they pursue those and invest a lot of their emotional energy into it, and a lot of times it just goes completely haywire.
But sometimes God, even in the is section of your life, changes the course of what you thought was going to be the way you were going to end your life.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to adjust to what that means,
Mm-hmm.
You might have to grieve it, or just kind of question God and work through it, because sometimes God's decision on what is best for you isn't really what you wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So
plus the whole body thing, like it just falls apart. Like when you're 30, you don't think that. You can't think it. Most people haven't had it when they're in their 30s. And
mm-hmm.
then it hits you and you're just like, wait a minute, my brain still wants to do all the things that could be things, but I just can't do it anymore.
Right?
Yeah. I went and our daughter and her family live in a remote area, and we went down there during Memorial Day, and my granddaughter is kind of a Tawanda type, and so
she is.
And so she wanted to go out bouldering, and so Grandpa, with his nearly 70-year-old body, thought, well, yeah, I'll go ahead and do it. And fortunately, I didn't fall down any ravines or slip and scrape myself up or break my neck or anything like that. But yeah, just navigating that whole experience, and I don't know if it was my wife or who said, well, why do you do stuff like that? And I said, well, there's not going to be a whole lot of other times that I'll have the chance to do this,
Yep.
And so, I might as well get it in while I can now. So it says, somebody says it seems like their comments are pending, but I don't see who that is. And so I don't know, Janice is monitoring their Facebook, but it's not coming up. So I'm sorry, I have to apologize for who's trying to comment, because
maybe if they went to because you have so many of these.
Yeah. Which one are you looking at?
Chosen.
Okay. I'll look and see if it's on a different channel. You watch that one and I'll see if it's on a different one. So is it like, so it's Norbois, she says. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the next question. Well, walking with Matthew, Philip says, I was something else too. Once you've met the Messiah, M is all that matters. What do you think about what he says, and how about for you?
I love that.
Tell me why.
Because the person I was and still is, but I was not, not the person I, all the things I committed, and that he can look at me now and as a new creature, it's just amazing to me.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So
I think for me too is like sometimes we can't forgive ourselves of the things that we've done. So we spend so much time in the past asking God to forgive us over and over and over for things that we have done that he's already forgiven us for. And if we could just learn that once we met the Messiah, is all that matters, and then just go from there, I think that we would be happier and our relationship would be stronger.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I do think.
Go ahead.
Teaching it, I do think saying that to ourselves is important, because we don't believe him when he says it's all that matters is the end. We still, like Jana said, we want to go back and think of, oh, well, here's all the things I did, and I think we humans have a really hard time believing that the M is what's the most important.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's, and I was thinking about that. Actually, Janice went through that question when we were bringing the pizza home, and if you stop and think about it, and I had to kind of come to terms with this here recently in my own life, is that if you stop and think about it, to not accept God's forgiveness is really it's a statement of disbelief and in doubt. Because and even to not accept God's love for you essentially at one level nullifies the cross. I mean, come on. The cross is a very dramatic statement of the depths of God's love for us, and so and I just have to accept that, even though that is that you, Janice? Yeah. Okay, so different comments are popping up and distracting me.
Not that one.
What, this one here?
That's me.
Okay, yeah, I already did that one. So, yeah.
You know what I thought good in the show, how they portrayed Philip said that to Matthew, the look on Matthew's face when he said that, like he was like in shock, like, wow. Yeah.
I can't remember if right after that Peter comes up.
He does.
Yeah. And he kind of like once again tries to put Matthew in check. But it's ironic that, and Matthew kind of turns it around on him and says, you're not that hot yourself. He has a past too. And that's the story of all of us who come to Christ, is that we all have a past. That's why we need Jesus. So, yeah. So, okay, let's go to the next question. For much of his life, Matthew felt like an outsider. Philip relates. How does coming to Jesus give you a place to belong, regardless of your past? In what ways does it make you even more an outsider? So there's two things there. One, it gives you a place to belong, but in another way, it kind of makes you an outsider. Speak about those.
Well, I think Jesus is the great equalizer.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think you got it, you don't with him. If you don't have it, you got it with him. So,
Yeah.
he just makes it. I know when we say, the ground is even at the foot of the cross, but it really is. I mean, it really, really is. There's not. And I remember, Terry and I, this is me, but I remember that sermon you preached. Oh my gosh, it was probably 20 years ago. And it was about that. And you drew a cross on the easel. And I don't know, it just hit me so much that it is equal. He is the one who he makes it all even, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's just a great equalizer.
Yeah. Is that, yeah, it's wonderful, and he gives us a place to belong, and no matter what we've done in our past, that Jesus extends the invitation to you. Come, he says in Matthew 11:28, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest in your souls. So, but in what way does it kind of make you more of an outsider? So,
I guess it depends where you are.
Yeah.
Like, in our office, there are a lot of non-Christians. So sometimes I feel like they look at you like a third eye or something when you say something.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I do a lot of weddings, and I believe this might be Nora that wrote this. It says, you told me once when I was so down, God wants you to experience his grace in a deeper way. And certainly he does. He wants us to understand that that grace, his grace is sufficient. But as I was mentioning about the weddings, is that, and oftentimes, I remember one really quite vividly where we did a wedding on one of those yachts, harbor cruise in Newport, in Newport Harbor, which is really a cool thing. If you ever want to do a wedding, I would recommend doing one of those, or an anniversary party too. That might be an idea. So, but because you cruise the harbor, and you got the I can't remember. So there's two levels, and you do the ceremony on the upstairs, and then they have the reception on the downstairs. No.
They have the wedding on the upstairs. We have the chairs all lined up with the aisle down the middle and everything. And then once the wedding's over, they have everybody go downstairs and have hors d'oeuvres or whatever. And they take pictures and stuff. And then they transform the whole upstairs into a dining room with the round tables. And you eat. And then they move some of the tables and you have a dance floor.
Yeah. Okay. See, she knows.
It was fun.
Yeah. Well, and the point is that it's almost like you have leprosy when you are in the ministry, because everybody else is taking their seat at the table. But nobody wants to sit with the pastor.
They don't want to get drunk at the table with the pastor.
You know, and so many of our weddings are like that. It's like we have cooties.
Yeah.
You know? We're like the kid.
We're so used to it.
We're like the kid in the lunchroom. You know? Or the guy in prison that nobody will sit with. So, all right. Well, you know, yeah. So it makes you an outsider, and you know, people don't know how to sometimes relate to you, or you know, whatever. And
so you guys should just hit the dance floor.
Yeah.
I don't dance.
Yeah. And Janice would hit the dance floor literally.
On my face.
You know? so, yeah. And my dance skills are legendary. I have to tell you a quick story. You know, and when I was doing the work in Cambodia, helping kids who had been trafficked there, and we had a safe house for those kids. And I told the leaders of the ministry, I said, I just really feel led by the Lord, you know, that I would like to have a dance party tonight with the kids, you know, and not some sort of, you know, crazy whatever type of dance party, but just kind of like, you know, a dad with his daughters, and let them dance, you know, stand on my feet or whatever, because some of those kids were just really little kids. And so we did that and all. And so it became kind of a fixture whenever I go to Cambodia, is that we would have a dance party with the kids. And I remember the kids talking about my dancing skills. And one of them says, "Carrie, you dance like a drunk man." I don't think that was a compliment. So, all right. What question are we on?
I think we're on 4.
Number 4? Okay. Nathaniel offered his work as a gift to God, yet none of his dreams materialized. His prayer reflects the words of Psalm 102, verses 1 and 2, which reads, "Hear my prayer, Lord. Let my cry for help come to you. Do not hide your face from me when I'm in distress. Turn your ear to me when I call. Answer me quickly." How difficult is it for you, or is it sometimes to believe that God sees you and cares about you when your life and things are falling apart? I didn't read that question that well, but I think you get the drift. You know, so how difficult is it for you to believe that God really takes notice of you when things are falling apart?
That was a tough scene because you could see him pleading out, and he just wasn't getting no answers right away. He was probably waiting for anything, and then I'm sure it's very hard, especially like in going through life and you're praying anybody's part of life or something like that where it's going real tough and you're not getting no answers. And so I think that's what he was going through right there, in distress.
And I'm not asking, I'm not fishing for details, but how about for you? Have you ever been in that space in your own life, Val?
Well, it's hard to think right now. Yeah. I'm sure we have, or I have, but can't reflect right now. Thinking kept on.
I'm sorry for putting you on the spot like that. How about you, Lorraine? Have you ever been in that space? You don't have to tell any details.
Yeah, I really like the poignancy of how he set his dreams on fire, and then he threw those ashes on his head, which I know is a Jewish custom for grief. You know, I know that. But it's like it's like we have to grieve that because it, you just, there's no way, you just have to get through it. There's no way to get over it, or, that kind of a, depression. And, I don't know what his intent was really up there under the fig tree. But that was one of my favorite parts because he was just done. He was done trying to push his own way through life or whatever, which is what we're supposed to do. I mean, we're supposed to do stuff, I guess, but he just had to grieve that deep, deep loss. And I love that part. And I have felt that too.
Yeah.
I didn't do it quite as quick as he did. It took me a little bit longer to get through the grief.
But you didn't meet the Messiah the next day face to face.
Yeah.
And get a hug.
Yeah, that might spin your head around. Here's some. It says, actually, after a while, I felt that I needed to be in the bottom of the pit to recognize my failures and shortcomings, to see God's grace and love for me. Yeah. And that's one of the advantages of being at the bottom, is that the only place you can look is up. And and so it can really be a time, when we come to the end of ourselves, it can be a time when God shows up, but he never does it. I've never seen it. I'm trying to think. I've never seen it where it's just like instantaneous. I've had the worst experience in my life, and bam, God shows up and everything's better.
But then if you read Psalms, it's just like full of
lament,
and sorrow and crying out to God.
Yeah. But,
I was thinking on that. I was thinking on that when we talked about how God sees us, that it's wonderful, but it's also very terrifying that God sees us all the time. That can be a pretty terrifying thought. I mean, a good one. It's a good terrifying because he can be trusted, but it is still terrifying to think that, man, he just heard what I said in my head. It's like, uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Yeah. Here's one of my favorite Psalms. It's and this is Psalm 13. It says, "O Lord, how long will you forget me? Forever? How long will you look the other way? How long must I struggle with anguish in my soul, with sorrow in my heart every day? How long will my enemy have the upper hand?" And it's wrenching to be in that space. But it's really an opportunity. Well, okay. And I'm sure we come to this later on but why does God allow these things? I mean, we don't have the specific answers, but why does he allow them? Why doesn't he just jump in and save the day?
Yeah, that's the big question, though. That's a big question. Yeah. Because he has his purpose, but who wants to suffer while his purpose is being accomplished? I mean, really, that's that is my human response is, why do they have to suffer? Why do we have to suffer to get to your purpose? And yet I know the answer is he knows what's best. Yeah. And I just feel so much for Matt and Karen right now. It's like, oh my goodness, but I know we're going to be sitting around someday going, look at what God did.
Right.
Yeah.
How wonderful that he did that, even though in the midst of it was suffering. I don't know. He's very mysterious to me in that area.
He is. Even tonight, she went to the emergency room, and so she was having some health concerns, and so we talked her in. We said, "Hey, you better get yourself into the emergency room and just get checked out." And so, but yeah, it's
But something else that Karen told me this week that really shows as an example of this is that, she really encourages her kids to read their Bible every day and stuff, and as they've gotten older into teenage years, sometimes they kind of grouse about it, you know.
Yeah.
And so Jack says, I'm just going to open my Bible and read something. And he opened it, and it was like a really long chapter. And he's like, no, I'm not going to read that. I'm going to read something else. And so he opened his Bible to Psalm 64. And he read it, and he said, Mom, this psalm is all about our life. And she said, for a 15-year-old to be able to see that and be able to see how that God has that in his word, and it described them.
I'm going to have to look that up now. I'm not going to read it right now, but I have to look it up.
It's all about, you know, going through all these hard times and your enemies after you, and, you know, saying bad things about you and all these different, I mean, it was like... And, you know, it's like sometimes he kind of struggles with, you know, maybe, I don't know if his faith, but, you know, he's a kid and he struggles with stuff.
Yeah.
And she says, man, it just really was a testimony to him, you know, of God being there with you when he read that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's wonderful. You know,
I thought I told you that.
You did.
Oh.
But yes, you did. I just didn't remember, you know, at the top of mind.
Okay.
That's one of the things about when you're married, and I'm just passing this along for anybody who's out there who's married, is that I don't live in her mind, and so when she says things, that sometimes I have to say context. You know,
I forget he's not a girl.
Yeah. And we wouldn't have had half the fun that we've had if I was. Don't go there. Okay, I won't. All right. So what number are we on now? Oh, okay. Is that right? Okay, yeah. Number 5. Okay. In this episode, Matthew says, I know he knows what he's doing. I wish I did. Certainly the Lord could reveal to us what the future holds for us. Why doesn't he?
Because we can't handle the truth.
Yeah, probably so.
We would just try to control and manipulate. It's better that we just don't know.
Yeah. And you know, not every episode in your life has a happy ending. Okay. And let me just qualify that. For instance, Janice has had a number of people in her family who have had Alzheimer's or dementia. And some of them have been really solid Christians, you know. And it's not like, okay, and God heals us from all of our ailments, you know, ultimately, because I believe that, you know, that when we die, that we go into his presence, into perfection there. But those seasons of being in that space can be very long and draining. And, you know, and if you saw that in advance, you probably would say,
I don't want to know.
No, I just don't want this, you know. And I don't know why, you know, but in this world, that's just the way it works. There's going to be pain and suffering and disappointments, you know. So, but I just have to share this personal note. Is that I try to start every day with prayer. I try to wrap up every day with prayer, and I try to connect with the Lord throughout the day in prayer. It doesn't have to be formal, you know, but sometimes I do. I just take a little prayer break and go into the room and pray. But this morning, you know, and I've spoken about my ADD and also my OCD and my other alphabet soup things. Mm. My head was just not in the right space. And I prayed, but it was just a horrible experience. And it kind of, you know, set the tone for my day. throughout the morning and all of that stuff, that it was just, I love it when my life flows. And this morning and today, it was that I was not anywhere close to the zone, wherever that happens to be. And but I had to step back from that, because I think that too often we read God's faithfulness based on our circumstances or our emotions or our frame of, or our mental, And I was not in a good space, and it wasn't like I was in a dark space, but I was just not firing on all cylinders today. And it really, actually, at one point it kind of scared me, and I was thinking, I hope this is not previews of coming attractions, But we just have to trust that God is greater than our God's grace and love is greater than our biggest problems and weaknesses, And so, all right. I know that was a little bit of a side note, but okay. The conversation between Philip and Nathanael is recorded in John 1:43 through 46, where Nathanael says, "Nazareth, can anything good come from there? How might our prejudices and preconceived notions cause us to miss what God is doing in the world?" What do you think? Let me ask you this. From what vantage point was Nathanael assessing the Nazarenes?
He was an educated businessman,
Business savvy.
Jewish man in a Roman society.
Yeah, and obviously this is just conjecture on the part of the writers, but all of this stuff could be very plausible, but it's very plausible that because he had such kind of like a knee-jerk reaction, that Nazareth, that place, can anything good come out of there? And he was probably looking at it through his own lens and not realizing that God's Messiah. Hey, Nathaniel. Newsflash. The Messiah is coming from there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Just on a. Go ahead.
Go ahead now. Go ahead now. You first.
Just on a little side note there, me and Nikki were talking about that question earlier, and we were talking about lodge grass in Montana. It's on a reservation, really, really poor neighborhood. And we were talking about, our probably the prejudice on those people that we think, how could they? And then Nikki brought up the question, what if Jesus came from there? Yeah. And you think, whoa, it's... Yeah, you think about the people there, and just like Nazareth, Jesus coming out of Nazareth.
Quick about town.
You
Somebody
said what now?
Driven through there. I was just looking at because I thought the name sounded so pretty, and then when we went through it, we realized they were looking at us really strangely, and my cousin said you should have never driven through there. But we had a negative opinion about that, but we said, what if God came from a place like that?
Yeah, it's crazy, and obviously God did these things deliberately, and part of that was to disabuse us of our notions of status and the importance of status. We think that everything that's of any consequence is going to come from educated people of a certain class.
It might keep us from, telling other people about Jesus too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I lost the questions there. So. Okay.
Earlier in the when Mary hosted Shabbat, didn't somebody else say something about Nazareth?
Oh yeah.
Too?
Yeah.
So is it known to back then?
It's just known as just a little hick town, and so and nobody had any expectations. As a matter of fact, even the Jews, they knew that the Messiah would come from Bethlehem, the city of David, but the whole thing about Nazareth, because Jesus was born, as we know, in Bethlehem, but Nazareth was not on their radar, and so they just had really a hard time kind of like processing all of this, and I think that this was by design, that God wants to shake up our worldly categories to learn to see things from a heavenly perspective. So so one, and I put this up earlier, but we get blinded by our prejudices, and prejudice is not just a white person's problem, although our culture likes to just keep on saying that over and over and over. I've worked enough in intercultural situations to know that it's a human problem and not just a white person's problem. So if it weren't for Philip saying, "Come and see," Nathaniel might not have ever found his way to Jesus. Who invited you to come and see? And where would you have been if you did not accept the invitation? So, who invited you guys?
It's funny. My wife invited me. Because I think in the early days, I think a lot of us were born and raised Catholic. And as a little kid, we didn't understand anything. So then, I think in high school, I went to a little group, Young Life, they called it back then, for high school students. And then after high school, you just did your own thing, faded away like that. And until my wife asked me, found a little church named Pathway. And then we went to there, and that's who invited me, got me going.
Cool.
I remember meeting Nikki on the first day she came to Pathway with Debbie Dowding.
Yeah, Debbie.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah. So, were you guys living out in Paris at the time? Moreno Valley?
No, Debbie lived in the house we live in now.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know why. How about Mark and Debbie? Did they live out in Paris, Moreno Valley?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. How about you, Lorraine? Who invited you to come and see?
My culture, how I was raised, was the come and see. I mean, my parents, of course, were, I always say we didn't have family devotions, but I always knew who my mom was devoted. My mom and dad were devoted to, because I would say it was them, that by their example, and then the church we were in, there wasn't an invitation like Andrew got or whatever. It was just this is it. This is the way, the path you should choose. But I don't know. It just was my culture, and to me, it's like, of course, I would follow this, even though my young adult age, I kind of went through a whole. I went through a time of really getting in the Word and figuring out what I myself believe, because I thought, well, I can't just believe this because they told me to. I have to know this myself, and I was living next to this crazy neighbor, and I just needed to be in the Word so that I could figure out what to say and how to react and all that. So I don't know. It was my family.
Yeah. Janice?
I was the same way. Like my parents, from the time we were born, taught us about Jesus and God, and I've always believed in God, but really, what helped me a lot was when I went to Bible college, and the teachers that I had there and everything. I mean, they made it so alive, and I learned so much there that my faith in God really grew then. And then hanging out with Carrie for all these years rubbed off on me.
Yeah. So, yeah, as for me, it was Bill Paul, and many of you know that story, and his son Tim and daughter-in-law Marilyn, and Bill not too long ago died. He was in his 90s, and Tim and Marilyn are still alive and have a vibrant ministry in Florida. So yeah.
That's Nikki.
Oh, I thought I did. Nikki, your turn.
I was raised Catholic, and I knew all the rituals to do, but it didn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
And my dad told me, he goes, you can be whatever religion you want, but he said you need to stick with it. Don't go halfway. So he let me choose, and I was working at Del Taco when I was 18, and my supervisor invited me to a non-denominational church, and I couldn't believe the difference.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Cool. Good for you. You know, I don't think I've ever heard these stories from you guys before, so that's good. You know. So, okay, so and we're not going to spend any time on this really, but I just want to put this out there as to whom might you offer the come and see invitation. And if no one comes to mind, start asking God to give you the opportunity to invite another person. And you don't have to know all the answers. You know, you can just tell them your story. And you never know what type of impact that's going to have, you know, in someone's life. It says, and Jesus invited me when I experienced the hardest time in my life. And here it says, my path wasn't a simple path. Many people played a part in my coming to the Lord, beginning with my third grade best friend. How wonderful is that? No, really. You know?
That is cool.
You know? So, all right. This says, Jesus tells Nathanael that I saw you under the fig tree. What does it mean to you, knowing that Jesus sees you even when you're struggling most with your faith?
Maybe a side of Jesus that we believers don't really say too much about is how patient and kind. And it's you know, it's magnified in the character of Jesus. He just puts up with their stuff, and he loves them, and he sees them, and he welcomes them still to follow him. I don't know, to me that's the greatest. It's the greatest.
And keep the faith.
Yeah.
Always hear that.
You know, and there's a couple sides to that. One is that that's comforting, but also for me, that there's kind of like this thing that, well, hey, if you saw me, why didn't you do something about it? but and that just, you know, speaks to my own, I guess, underdeveloped character. But nevertheless, I'm grateful that the Lord takes notice. You know, you were talking about that in the car a little bit.
That's the scene that really made me cry. You know, and I was thinking about it. I was telling Carrie, you know, when it's hard for me sometimes to think about God being there when I'm struggling and when I'm hurting and all that stuff. I don't feel like that He has the time for me or whatever. You know, like there's more important things for Him to be doing. You know. But I really like that. And I think some of that comes from being raised in a super legalistic kind of environment because, you know, I can always tell myself, well, you could have done more. You could have, been better. That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my sister, her husband died suddenly. My older sister, Vicky, her husband died suddenly. And, she was alone. And I remember her telling me that she used to just picture that Jesus was sitting in the chair and she would just crawl up on his lap. And I went, oh my gosh, what a beautiful thing to do when you're grieving and you're struggling, and just to picture yourself crawled up in Jesus's lap and him just holding you, not doing anything, just there holding you. It was beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But we don't know. We don't know what God is up to in our lives, but at the end of the day, there's actually only three options that we have. That at the end of the day, that we one possibility is to believe that God is sadistic or non-caring, indifferent, or as so many people do, that he's non-existent, or that he is good and loving and wise. And although he doesn't explain himself to us, that everything that he is doing serves those good purposes and loving purposes in our life, And so it's hard to sometimes come to that. But, at least in my life, I believe that there's enough evidence to trust God. And
sure.
So, and so I'm going to do it. Even when a friend of mine, Joe Branco, that all of us who are on screen, we know his story, how suddenly he died at church. And he would say that when we can't trace his hand, we can trust his heart. And that's a good thing to remember. So, okay. Nathanael's life was going in one direction before meeting Jesus. Afterwards, he found a deeper purpose. In what ways is your story like that? What is the deeper purpose that you've discovered in following Jesus?
I think mine right now is that I'm supposed to be in my grandchildren's life. Mm-hmm. Like there's some reason it's a deeper purpose that I've had, even though I felt that with my own children, but I was at least contributing the daily stuff to my kids. So, but with my grandchildren, they're like at a distance, mm-hmm. And I just feel this is just a real important thing for me to pour my faith and my life into my grandchildren, even though sometimes they say I'm old and whatever. Like, my youngest grandson asked me if I knew about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I'm like, I was there. But,
Kennedy asked me for advice.
I just know that, that's my purpose right now. It's the deepest thing I've ever done. Because, I don't know.
And that's you're absolutely right, because I think a lot of times we tend to minimize our value in old age, but for many people, and I've heard a lot of people talking, they say, about the wonderful influence that grandma or grandpa was on my life.
I can't even tell you how many women I've talked to who said, if it weren't for my grandmother, I would not be here today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I on Sunday, I teach Sunday school at our church, which is really small because I usually have like 1 to maybe 4 kids, and a lot of times it's one, and it happens to be Nikki and Val's grandson. But we were talking about birthdays or something. I can't remember why, and I said, I said, guess how old I'm going to be on my birthday? Because I knew it would blow his mind. And I told him, he went, you're old.
Funny.
Yeah. So Nora writes this, and I can't put it on the screen because it'll go way too fast. It's a little bit long. It says, I don't think that this prayer is to be taken home is the best approach to your pain. So here is a thought to consider. What if God is seeking to accomplish something good in you and through you as a result of this pain? I'm not certain of all that this might involve, but it could be that God wants you to experience his grace in a deeper way. Maybe he wants you to reflect that grace to others who who have been similarly betrayed. Who knows? You may be, you may be used by God to bring others hope who have lost hope.
Good one.
I've been counseling a man here lately, and I won't share any of the details of his story, but other than this, is that I told him, you can't give what you don't got. And when we go through a very difficult experience in life, there's somebody on the road behind us who is facing similar circumstances. Now, there's no way to give them hope or strength or encouragement if you haven't, or healing, if you haven't gone through that yourself. So you can't give what you don't got. So we have to walk through we have to walk through that valley and shadow of death to be able to offer other pilgrims hope along the way, and that's what I want. I don't want, and I've had my fair share of pain, not as much as others, and more than some. And I'm not interested in measuring whose life is worse. You always feel the pebble in your own shoe. But I don't want to waste my pain. And when I go through a very difficult season in my life, I want to be able to take that and metabolize it and come out on the other side of it, with deeper healing and growth and insight than I have before. It's kind of interesting, and I won't go into all of this, but it's interesting that many of the things that my kids are experiencing, I experienced in ministry myself, and I know, Lorene, that you have too, and it's just been in one regards a blessing, because I can sit down with them and say, hey, okay, here's some of the things you're going to struggle with, or here's where you're at right now, or here, I just sent a text to my son-in-law just the other day, and I said, okay, great idea, but be prepared for this. And it was based on my own experience. And C.S. Lewis says this, that God never causes us to shed a needless tear. And that, and I used the things I learned from my pain to help others to cope with theirs, so.
And the tear thing that you just said made me think of what Joyce said about the bottles that you had, and how, like there's the scripture that talks about how that God put your tears in jars of clay.
Yeah. It collects your tears in a bottle. Yeah. So, it's interesting. So,
yeah,
go ahead.
Quote, I heard a quote recently. I don't know where it came from. It said, if it's easy, then who gets the glory? And I think about sometimes our life is super hard, but we are to give God the glory for all of it.
Yeah. Amen for that. Thank you, guys. Hey, man, I really appreciate you all. And, you're a blessing in my life in so many ways. And I appreciate you, taking time out of your lives to kind of like share with us on this broadcast. Anything you'd like to say before we wrap up? No? Okay. All right. Well, guys, I'll see you then next week. I'm going to just make a few closing remarks, and then we will be, and then we'll wrap up. So once again, thank you for joining us for our Discuss the Chosen, and you can find the details about it at discussthechosen.phonesites.com. You can join the Facebook group. It's a public group. It's open to anybody who wants to join. And and we stream to that group, but we also stream to other places just so that people can have a chance to eavesdrop on the conversation. We also invite your remarks in that group. Now, I don't always get around to approving the comments right away. I noticed the other day that I had some that were, people had made a comment that I didn't get to. And it's just that, a lot of times I get so busy spinning other plates in my life that I fail to circle back around to the Facebook group. But I'm grateful for each one of you who has tuned in this evening for the broadcast, that it's really been a blessing for me to bring these programs to you, and I trust that you've been blessed by it too. And so I hope that you'll be able to join us next week. We're here every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time. That's it for now. God bless you. We'll see you next time.